Okay.
I think it's recording.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of the spring affiliate meeting. Who does alcohol prevention, intervention, and recovery work? Creating a campus where all community members have a role in culture change. My name is Orlando Cooper, one of the graduate assistants at IHEC, and I'll be your moderator. I'm assisting Madison, the assistant director for the Illinois Higher Education Center for Alcohol, Other Drug, Violence, and Prevention, and we are very excited to be hosting today's event. Before I hand over the event over to Alicia, I have one housekeeping item I want to bring up. Certificates will be issued within a minimum of 10 business days from the webinar, and we will have the event available to view on the website later on. And if there are any questions during this presentation, don't be afraid to ask in the chat box. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Alicia Szydłowski. The stage is yours.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So it's a small crew today, but that is okay. We'll make this as fun and entertaining as possible. So as Orlando said, my name is Alicia Czachowski. I am the Director of Public Health Initiatives and Assessment at Tulane University. So in my role here, I manage our health promotion department, our recovery community, our assessment for our campus health department, and for the last year, I have also been in charge of our Tulane contact tracing unit. So excited to be here today. If during this, because this is such a small group, feel free to, if you have questions, you can either type it in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself, you can do that. That is just fine. Does not bother me at all. And I will go ahead and get this started. Come on. There we go. So to get started, kind of learning objectives for today, we are going to discuss the strategies on engaging campus partners in alcohol prevention, intervention, and recovery work. You'll be able to name 3 available resources to help structure a comprehensive campus alcohol plan. And you'll be able to describe benefits of a comprehensive alcohol plan on your campus. Also, just a caveat, if you can, I'm going to turn my head this way a few times. My camera is over here. My screen is actually right there. It works out really great for recording webinars because it looks like I'm not paying attention, but I am. So again, we're a small group today, but if the folks who are participating could use the chat feature, or if you want to unmute yourself and just share what department you work in, and do you currently have a plan for addressing alcohol prevention, intervention, and recovery at your institution? I'll give folks a minute to do that.
I am gonna have my video off for a while because I'm still watching my 3-year-old son, waiting for my partner to conclude his work. My name is Jamie Larson. I work at Illinois State University as an alcohol and other drug interventionist there. I run our basics program, and I also advise our collegiate recovery community. So really what my goals are is to push interventions related to substances other than alcohol across campus, because we are very lacking in that, and to continue to grow and build the collegiate recovery community.
Awesome. Welcome. And welcome to your 3-year-old as well. And then I'm just realizing I can't actually see the chat box. So if anybody is writing in the chat box, Orlando, would you be willing to read that off for me?
Sure, and we have another person here now too. Julie Mitchell.
Hello, Julie.
And I guess I can introduce myself again. I'm a graduate assistant for Illinois Higher Education Center. I help promote prevention through social media.
Oh, thank you. Welcome.
And I'm the Assistant Director of the Illinois Higher Education Center. Me and Orlando work in health and counseling services on our campus. And we do currently have a plan for addressing prevention and intervention, and that is taken care of in our counseling department on top of our grant being housed at the university.
We gotta love IHEC. For a little history for the folks who don't know me, I used to work at Northern Illinois University, so I have been a proponent of IHEC and used to attend lots of the meetings when I worked there. So we will move on. And so why is this conversation important? So about the time Madison and I were kind of talking about possibilities of doing something for IHEC this year, I had just kind of gone through this whole process on my campus around a comprehensive alcohol strategy. And so my boss, who is the AVP of campus health, came and he's like, okay, we need a plan for alcohol and other drugs, to Jamie's point, for the university, figure it out. Okay. Obviously, this is bigger than just me. We have lots of people across campus, and I don't think me by myself can create a comprehensive alcohol and other drug plan for a university solo. It's just, it would not be a good plan. So I started thinking to myself, okay, I need to get other people involved. We don't have a set alcohol and other drug coalition. And so I really needed to kind of start thinking about what are the next steps in this process. And more importantly, how do I engage those people in the process? So I started kind of with some of the seminal documents of the health promotion field, because obviously that's where I work. And one of the first things I kind of thought about was the Okanagan Charter, which was developed at a conference in Canada, really focused on health promoting universities and colleges. And a key part to me and part of their charter is that health promotion is not just the responsibility of the health sector, but must engage all sectors to take an explicit stance in favor of health, equity, social justice, and sustainability for all, and while recognizing that the well-being of people, places, and the planet are interdependent. So that to me is very clear. We should be working on this together. I also then looked at the standards of practice for health promotion in higher education from the American College Health Association that also states that health promotion in higher education cannot be done solely by an individual or a health promotion office. Rather, it requires the collective effort of the campus community. Two parts there. And then the ACHA Healthy Campus Coalition also focuses on the fact that campus is a community and that you really need to be engaging folks across the campus in this work. So I kind of took all this information and then was able to go back to not just my AVP, but then his group of associate and assistant vice presidents, and then his boss, who is the vice president of student affairs, and say, okay, we're going to start reaching out to members of your teams, to people across campus, to be building this. And this is part of the tools I use to kind of advocate for this much more comprehensive process, as opposed to me just kind of creating something on my own. The other part that I am assuming most of you on this call will be very aware of is obviously alcohol abuse and misuse is very connected to issues in student success. So for some folks across campus, just saying, hey, we should be working on this together isn't enough. It's, hey, this is what we should be working together, and here is how this substance impacts our students negatively, and this is why you should be involved in this. So kind of our in summary that our campuses are communities, and that this is really a community approach. And depending on who you are, where you are, whether you're a group of one, you have a whole health promotion or counseling team working on this topic area, you really need to also be thinking about kind of faculty, staff, students, the administration of the university, and then also the community around your campus, because that definitely can have an impact the um, on the students who are living on campus. So this is kind of setting the stage to where you begin. So I'm going to kind of go through the process today, thinking that you or I have been asked to create a comprehensive alcohol plan for your institution. Then where do you begin? This is one of the places I began. This is the SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, better known as SAMHSA. And they created this strategic prevention framework. It's typically been used with alcohol and other drugs, though some areas are now using it also for sexual health prevention work as well, around preventing STIs and unwanted pregnancies. But obviously for today, we're going to focus on the substance side of things. I really like this framework because it takes everything from beginning to end. It's a cycle. There is no end to this. Once you get back to the beginning, you're still learning, you make changes and you act. So I'm going to kind of go through this whole process today as we're talking through it. So I'm not going to go through each of the individual ones right now. What I am going to do is talk about the middle part. So this is one of the things that I kind of find as unique about this particular prevention framework, is that it takes into account sustainability and cultural competence. One of the things we've kind of seen over time in all areas of higher education, but I've seen in my tenure working in health promotion and higher education, is the sustainability of the work. We suddenly find out that there's a health issue. We throw lots of money at said health issue, lots of time, lots of effort. And then a new health issue comes up. We do the same thing over again, and we kind of forget about previous health issue. We've seen this with alcohol in the past, in the 80s and 90s. We're seeing that right now in sexual violence prevention, and we've seen it a bit with mental health and well-being. So one of the things that this particular framework really talks about is, as you are creating your plan, think about how you are going to sustain whatever it is you are building. If you're adding in new positions, how are those being paid for? If you're creating new programs, how are you going to sustain those over time? Or are you going to evaluate those over time to see if they're working, to see if they should be sustained? So that, I think, is a really nice, unique tool that's part of this plan, and really gets you thinking about kind of what's going to happen in the future. The other part is the cultural competency piece. And especially, I would say, in the last year, we have really seen the fact that being culturally competent, focusing on issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion is crucial across the board. We don't always think about this in terms of alcohol and other drugs work, but it is actually really something that is important and we should be taking into consideration. When you look at our historical best practices about what works in higher education and what does not, around harm reduction approaches and around alcohol and other drug initiatives, most of the studies are done with white, semi-affluent, traditionally aged students. We're just now seeing more studies including things like gender being non-binary, as well as more work looking at the racial differences and ethnic differences between groups. So learning and being able to talk about alcohol and other drugs with different populations and how different populations have been impacted by alcohol and other drugs is really crucial. And something that we should all be kind of thinking about. And as you're working on a comprehensive alcohol and other drugs plan, something to kind of bring up with the team that you're working in. I know it's something right now our recovery community manager has been working on is how to engage students. Because again, similar to other alcohol work, most recovery studies done with white cisgendered men. And the other part of cultural competency that I think is really crucial to take into consideration are our student subcultures. We often hear about Greek life being a hotbed of high risk usage, but are there other groups on campus that do have high risk use? What about the culture of the students who choose not to drink, who choose not to use substances? So often in this work, we take the approach that everybody's drinking, everybody's using. But we really need to also be targeting and looking toward those folks who are choosing not to use. So I'll get off my soapbox for that for a moment. So this is kind of my starting point when I began this process. So looking down at that first purple circle, that was assessment. And I'm going to put out there right now, I am an assessment nerd. I love it. So if I go off on it a little bit, I apologize. But obviously, what is assessment? Where you collect that information to kind of figure out what is happening on your campus so that you can make good decisions about what type of work that needs to be done. This can also be a great strategy to figure out who should be included in this conversation. If you're finding out through assessments that there's, a certain residence hall on campus where there seems to be more use going on, or if there's a certain subgroup of students, I'm going to throw out the marching band is just really known for high risk use. Okay, now we know that, hey, there's a couple other groups out there that we may want to get involved in this conversation. Other things that data can do to help, really helps us obviously support our strategic planning efforts. That's really kind of what I'm talking about today. And the identifying partners for that collaboration. It can guide our budgets, kind of help us figure out what we need to spend our money on. And that's always a good thing because at some point somebody is going to ask you why you're choosing to do this and why you're choosing to spend money on X, Y, or Z. You can point back to, well, our data says the administration likes that. Identifies any training needs that we might need, and then kind of just overall improves programs and services. So this is our first more interactive moment. And again, small group, but what sources of data have you utilized on your campus when making decisions around your alcohol and other drug programming?
This is Jamie from Illinois State. The ACHA and CHA data. And then I work in the student conduct office at this time. And so I have access to all the conduct numbers. Otherwise, it's really hard to gain information because we are a very survey saturated campus. And so that pretty much provides a barrier for any other sort of data gathering.
Yeah, that survey fatigue is real. And now we're seeing a lot of schools that want to do COVID surveys, which is going to add a whole new level of fatigue. Any other sources of data that folks want to share? Cool. I will go on to the next slide. And so one of the places I like to start is our biennial review. If you have never heard Eric Davidson talk about the biennial review, take that training. He's very excited about it. But part of your biennial review is your conduct numbers, your transport numbers, any information you have from assessments that you've done. It's a nice starting point. So if you're not the person on your campus who does the biennial review, try to figure out who is doing it and see if you can get a copy of it, because that great starting point. Residential life and housing often keeps, if that's not part of your conduct data, they may have their own data around issues going on in the residence halls and any alcohol or other drug related problems that are happening. They may also know if you're not the department who's doing programming in those residence halls. They may be able to share with you evaluation information. Talk to whoever your director or hall directors are for that group. Obviously, we've already kind of talked about student conduct, wealth of information there. If you have campus or local police, they may be able to give you some information if your conduct office doesn't have it. Another great group, which we don't always think about, is our health center. If your health center is doing any sort of alcohol or other drug assessments as part of a regular visit rotation, I know ours does SBIRT. So it's a brief alcohol assessment, and then they use that to make referrals. But they can sometimes get me that information to then share on kind of what we're seeing coming in the doors at the health center. If you have a local EMS service that you work with, some campuses contract with a local service, or if you have your own, I go with that. Obviously, NCHA, the core, if you have any homegrown surveys. I believe Jamie said you use basics data, another great source of information. You have students coming in for that. If you want to add some additional assessment questions in, it is a very specific population because typically it's the people who've gotten in trouble, but at least you have a population there that you can basically do the assessment for you. One of the things that we've done a little bit more in the last couple of years is doing some focus groups and key informant interviews with some of those populations that we don't have as much information about. So we've worked with some of our historically marginalized communities or our students who choose not to drink. And we've been able to get some more targeted information around those groups, which has been helpful because one of the things I know we've heard in the past is that some of our programming didn't speak to them because it wasn't talking about either the substances they chose to use or how, when, what group, where they were choosing to use substances. Okay, so now you have all this information and you're still just an N of 1. What do you need to do now? And this is the part where we start bringing in the other humans. So I started with, this is kind of the basics about who you might be interested in either bringing in or talking to these people about who to bring in to get more information, to get some buy-in. Like, you may not need to have the actual dean of students, but your dean of students may know of some faculty or some staff members who have an interest in alcohol and other drugs, and that person might be able to get you that information. Same things if you're not within student affairs, your student affairs group may be able to kind of point you to some staff who are members who are, either really interested in this topic area or who directly do this type of work. If you have, I have student conduct on here twice, I just realized. I've looked at these slides a bazillion times and I just noticed that. So I apologize. I really am excited apparently about working with conduct. One area which I know we don't always think about, but if you want your comprehensive plan to be truly comprehensive, engage human resources. A lot of times that's going to be the group that obviously may have what is available to your employees. So is there a on-campus AA meeting that they're sponsoring? Is there as part of your insurance plan, specific services that your employees can take part in? I know that's not something because my department does not serve staff and faculty. I don't know as much about that, but I can bring in a colleague from human resources and they are a wealth of knowledge on that information. And then another place I've seen people kind of forget is you include employees, but then people forget students. Having some student representation, very helpful. Because you may think you have a brilliant idea, and all the employees may agree this is a brilliant idea, and the students are like, what are you thinking? And they can help you rework things. For the folks on the call, anybody else that you would suggest collaborating with? All right, hop into the next one. So you can't just say, hey, come be part of this work group because I've asked you to be. When you're starting to think about how to engage individuals from these other groups, really start thinking about what makes them tick. What's going to motivate them? What's going to get them to get excited about this conversation? What are they going to gain out of this process? I know I don't want to make assumptions for the rest of the folks on this Zoom. I know I have been sometimes invited to meetings or groups and I sit there, I'm like, why am I here? What is the purpose of my being here? And you get through an entire meeting or an entire coalition group work and you come out the other end and you're still wondering, why am I here? So kind of creating a real understanding for them about why they were invited to begin with will help engage folks in this work. Doing regular check-ins throughout the process of planning, and then at the end of the semester, end of the year, reporting out kind of what this planning group has been working on. So when I started this process, I did an initial invite for participation just via email. And I gave them a very clear, this is the purpose of why we are meeting. Here's my tentative agenda for the initial meeting. And then what I did is I took all of the data that I was able to collect from across campus and I put it all together in a shared folder. So I know we use a system called Box here. It's HIPAA compliant, so that works well for me being in the health center. Some people will use like Google Drive, Google Docs. Microsoft Teams is another great way of doing this because I'll be honest, a lot of these files are very, very big. So emailing them to people, not going to work. But if you can kind of put them all in one place and make this folder available to people, this gets everybody on an equal playing field. Ask them to review this data. ask them to go over it, make notes, put questions into the documents itself, things that you can then talk about when you start meeting, so that it doesn't feel like you, as the person maybe leading this, or as the person who does the most of the alcohol or other drug work on your campus, you don't feel like you're the only one holding the information. Now everybody has access to it, and also helps kind of create some transparency on what's actually going on campus. I will say, maintain that there are some caveats here. Some campuses, administrations may not be as open to data sharing. So anytime you gather stuff, check with whomever you are getting it from that it is okay to share with this group. I feel like I'm very lucky that I can share our data across the group that I've been working with. But it just check. And then I've asked folks to do a pre-meeting assessment. And you may be thinking, oh dear God, why are we doing another assessment? We are historically very siloed in higher education. And I know one of the things that kind of tends to frustrate me a lot is when I see, when I'm in a meeting and somebody is saying to me, oh, I can see our, no, can I see it? No, I still can't see our chat. I think people are putting things in the chat. So if there's something, Orlando, that I need to respond to, you just let me know.
Sorry about that. People are responding in the chat. Jamie just said yes. Sorry
I
about
can
that.
see blinking for some odd reason. It just won't pop up on my screen. So yeah, just let me know if there's anything I should respond to.
Okay.
So I know I've been in meetings before where people have been doing brainstorming sessions, and partway through a brainstorming session, you then hear this great new idea that somebody has, and it's something that you're already doing. And then you have to balance this interesting political game of, do I share that we're already doing this and potentially look like, one, we're either not advertising it well enough, or two, I'm being wicked defensive about it, and, you know, kind of feels weird for the room. By doing a pre-assessment to kind of figure out what people are already doing, it kind of, again, puts everybody at that level playing field. So this is just a very simple one that I created for my group, which I sent out. I just said, hey, if you have things in these few areas, fill this out. If you're not doing anything in these areas and you can literally say, like, I don't have any initiatives, that's okay. We just want to know kind of what's happening so that we can share that with the group. And I did that in Qualtrics, and then just kind of made the link available to folks. So I gave them a due date, compiled the responses, and then before the meeting, I added that file to our box folder so that folks could review. And I sent them a message and said, hey, all the information's there. Feel free to review before our meeting. So we've already done a lot, and we haven't even gotten to the point where we're building a plan. So like I said at the very beginning, this is a time and labor intensive process if you're going to be doing it right. So again, get everybody involved right from the start. There might be people, and for me, it was specifically, it was our human resources person. They may not always get invited to be a part of alcohol and other drug conversations. So making sure that, like, when you're bringing your group together, you're going around sharing kind of why everybody's here, and the fact that we want to make sure that everybody kind of has that equal voice, and then bring the group together either in person, virtually, so you can all see one another. Your first meeting probably needs to be a little bit longer than an hour. Just going to put that out there. And then kind of where to start, reiterate the purpose, the goals, again, highlight that there's a bunch of different groups. And you can even share some of the stuff I shared at the very beginning, that alcohol and other drugs is something that impacts student success and therefore may be impacting a wide variety of departments across campus. And this is a best practice to have coalitions or task forces around alcohol and other drugs. And then I showed our group the strategic planning framework to kind of give them an idea of, this is the process we're going through, kind of, and here's where we are right now in the process, and here's where we want to kind of end up. There's a couple other things that I shared with folks. You may have seen this before. It's the Institute of Medicine's Continuum of Care Protractor. And I really like this, especially if you're going to include clinicians in part of this work. So if you're going to have medical providers, counselors, this speaks their language big time. A lot of the work of our health promotion departments, our student groups are probably in that prevention arm. Our treatment may be our counseling center. If you have a case management team, it might be in there as well. And then maintenance is probably going to be more of either, again, our counseling center, and then possibly our recovery community if you have a recovery community on campus. But again, kind of giving them we are looking at substances in a full, and what I mean by comprehensive model. We're not just looking at the prevention. We're not just looking at the intervention. We're looking at it across the board. The other thing I share is usually the socio-ecological model. And that particular model, again, plays a big role in health promotion. Outside of health promotion, I'll be honest, maybe some of your medical providers or counselors will know what it is. Maybe some of your folks, if you have social workers or case managers, will know what this is. Academic side didn't really know what this was. And some of our other student affairs professionals had not seen this before. But it also, this particular model really helps show that, again, in order to be comprehensive, we're not just looking at individual counseling. We're not just looking at workshops. We're looking at making sure that we are taking into account across the board those individual, interpersonal, institutional things going on, what's going on within your community, outside of the campus, what's going on policy-wise, both on campus and off campus. If you're in a place where eventually you might get to marijuana legalization, that creates a whole new level of interesting both campus and public policy conversations that you then have to take into account. So making sure that folks are kind of thinking of this work as a broad strokes, that you're not just focusing on one-on-one interactions with students. And then very easily, I just said, okay, we've met, we've talked, or I've given you all this data to review. And I will say, I was pleasantly surprised that most people actually reviewed the data. We really just ended up doing a SWOT analysis where we talked through what we saw in the data and what we were doing well and kind of what we were missing. And this really helped us create the baseline for our plan. This was going to be a moment in time where I broke folks into small groups. We are not going to do that today since we are a small group. But for those of you on the call, if you've worked with multidisciplinary planning groups, kind of what's worked and what hasn't for you in the past doing this type of work? And it's okay if you don't.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Oh, sure. If you have worked in a multidisciplinary planning group, so it does not need to necessarily be about alcohol or other drugs, any sort of multidisciplinary planning group where you're including students, faculty, staff, maybe community members, what's worked well, what hasn't?
I think what works well is just coming down to developing a strategic plan very quickly and then making sure that you are following that and actively building upon that in each of your sessions.
Yes. Yeah, if you're not focused on that, I think one of the things that I have seen that has sometimes brought groups down is you spend almost too much time planning and too much time changing stuff. Or you're not doing kind of those like check-ins. So you come up with a plan, you're like, great, here, go do your stuff. And you come back at the end of the semester, and because you haven't had those regular conversations, stuff hasn't gotten done. Any other thoughts? Cool. So what we ended up creating was basically a pretty comprehensive spreadsheet, which was our logic model. And I have an example of it on a next page, but we had our overarching program purpose, our goals, objectives, strategies, our short and long-term goals for that, our timeline. That is really helpful. A budget, if we had stuff already budgeted for that, or if we needed to kind of ask for money for things or kind of reallocate money, what we thought our initiatives were going to cost, and then who is in charge. This is the thing that I think can really be very helpful, is making sure you have as part of your planning process, your logic model, who is going to lead each strategy, each initiative that you're doing. If you don't include that, it can end up becoming kind of unwieldy for the person leading it. I know in previous, luckily this has not happened with my current group of humans, but in previous things I've been a part of, like you bring a group of people together, you come up with this great plan, you walk away, and suddenly all of this extra work falls on one or two individuals. And that can become incredibly overwhelming because you didn't kind of divvy up who's doing what, how are people doing it. It also allows you to kind of hold them people accountable over the course of your planning or your implementation process. So this is a really kind of simple, I took one part of our strategic plan, and this particular goal focused around looking at the connection between sexual violence and alcohol and other drug use. So this is one objective within that goal, and the different tactics. We also included our metrics. So how are we going to kind of do our simple process evaluations? The population that we were going to be focusing on, again, the office that was responsible for it. We also included kind of the partner departments, so that if there were certain people that were supposed to be working with the office responsible, that was in there. And then our timeline on when we'd like this done, or it may not even be done, but when is it going to be implemented by? So one of our goals was to train our basics providers to, if somebody disclosed a instance of sexual violence, what do you do? By fall of 2021, we need to make sure that happens. So we're going to be training them. Another great tool to use is the NIAAA, so the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. It's called College AIM. You may have seen this before. I think that Jason Kilmer who's one of the leads on this project, actually has done an IHEC presentation about that. I may be wrong, but he does a lot of presentations about this. So I'm going to include a slide at the very end that gives some resources. And I know that you can check out their webinars because he's done webinars from different groups on this.
Alicia,
Yes,
Jamie said, would you be willing to share the plan your campus developed?
I would be happy to share the plan my campus developed. So yeah, I'll send it your way. You know what? I just realized I didn't include my email address, I think, in any of my slides, but Madison and Orlando know how to get in touch with me. Also, if you look on the Tulane website, my email address is listed right there. So can I rename myself? Please ignore the changing slides. Nope, it's not going to let me rename. Oh, there it is. So now my name is now my email address. So feel free to reach out to me at any time. Pop back over here. So this planning worksheet, which is a little blurry, that I couldn't find a good picture of it, is something that's available at College AIM. And again, it's literally for strategic planning. It's one of the tools I shared with our group to kind of see what was going on across the board. And one of the things I really like about the College AIM is it gives a whole plethora of different strategies, both individual and population based. And it includes studies that show, hey, this works, or wow, this is definitely not a good idea. And what populations it's worked with, and the duration of effectiveness. So really helpful website. And then you can use this particular worksheet to build your plan. I've done whole presentations on College AIM, so I could go on about that. So if you have questions, feel free to ask, or like I said, email me. And then kind of one of the things I think that we don't always talk about is what are the benefits of actually creating a plan together as opposed to, hey, this is just me doing it by myself. If everybody's part of the planning process, they're more invested. I mean, just think about yourselves. If your boss comes to you and says, hey, do this, you're probably invested because your boss is telling you to do it. But if you were a part of a conversation about kind of creating something new and you got to be part of the planning process, now it's yours. And you're just naturally going to be more invested in it. It then allows for those shared goals, objectives, and strategies, a shared language. One of the things I did is once we finished our spreadsheet, we added it to that box folder. Everyone could see it. Everybody could see who was doing what. It created more transparency, and kind of folks knew what other people were working on, which was really helpful. And if you wanted to look at the spreadsheet at any time and say, hey, I really am interested in getting involved in X, Y, or Z, who's the department in, who's leading that part of the project? Oh, for me, it was the health promotion department. Great. So I might get an email from somebody who's interested in being a part of something that we were working on. And as always, it is in line with our best practices. Have your evaluation built in before you implement. Have that process going. Or as people are building their individual initiatives, encourage them to be thinking about the evaluation as they're building their initiatives. And like our group has been meeting once a month. So by having these regular check-ins, we kind of know where people are, if there's any issues, if folks are feeling that support, and it again increases that engagement and that buy-in in the entire process. So I highly recommend, even though I know y'all don't need any more meetings. I know I don't need any more meetings, but it really does help. So similar to assessment evaluation at the end, or not even at the end, but throughout, helps us kind of determine, are we meeting our goals? Um, it helps us promote our program. Is it actually helping our student body? And it really will help us describe our reach and impact. So there's two or really three different types of evaluation. So the one that the university and the administration typically asks for is our process. These are the numbers. So how many people are coming? Who is coming? What is the satisfaction? What is the cost? What is the staffing to participant ratio, the cost benefit analysis of, how much was it being, is an initiative being spent per person? These are important numbers because honestly, this is a lot of time what the administration wants to see. What these numbers don't get at is learning. So this is where our outcome evaluation comes into play. And these are really our learning objectives. We're going to get this from maybe some either evaluations we send out after initiative or at the end of the year. I know one of the ones, we're not doing this right now for this particular program, but we do as part of our sexual health initiatives here, a semesterly evaluation of students who have tapped in or scanned into any of our programs, and we look at their knowledge and skill learning, and that helps us evaluate, are we doing what we were hoping to do? And then obviously our longer term, we want to see changes in behavior practices, looking at maybe some of those things that our students are doing that we would prefer them not doing, some of those numbers going down. Long-term impact, and this is really long-term impact. This is potentially not something that you may even see in your time at your institution, but we may see that students are more successful. We may see that they're doing better in a health and well-being sort of way. Changes in our social dynamics for our students. Maybe you're seeing that, my pipe dream would be that our social engagement does not need to revolve around alcohol or other drugs. Our actual changes in our social norms and our environmental, and you may see some environmental impacts. Again, this is not going to be stuff that you maybe see within a year or 2 years. This might be your 5-year goal, your 10-year goal. But ideally, this is what you want to be working toward. So I said I would kind of share some resources. The Higher Education Center for Alcohol and Drug Misuse Prevention and Recovery, great resource. They're actually going to be doing a virtual conference in, I believe, August, and it's relatively cost effective. And so that's a good place to look. They also have a ton of free webinars and trainings available on their website. Like I said, the NIAAA College AIM, great tons of articles to read and ideas for what you could be doing on your campus. If you don't have as much information on recovery, the Association of Recovery in Higher Education, they also do an annual conference. I know this year it's going to be virtual again, but they also do relatively frequent webinars. So if you have a recovery community on your campus, or you're thinking about building a recovery community on your campus, they're a great resource. The Healthy Campus Coalition for the American College Health Association has some great blueprints on coalition building and how to kind of create a more comprehensive approach across your campus. And IHEC is awesome, and they do tons of webinars. So continue using them as a resource. At this point, I am going to stop talking for a few seconds and say, what questions do you have for me at this time? I can actually stop sharing my screen. Nope, I don't. There we go. Stop sharing. So now you can actually see each other. And you can actually see my email address in the chat. Please feel free to reach out. For any of you who are watching this recorded, again, feel free to reach out.
I don't know if you can see the chat yet, but Jamie
yeah.
said great ideas.
Thank you, Jamie. And yeah, anybody who wants to see the plan, I'm happy to share. Ooh, religious and spiritual life. Yeah, that is a good one to work with. Okay, I'm going to tell a quick story before we. One of the areas that we've actually been working with is our Hillel groups, because as part of their Sabbath dinners, they were providing wine for students. And so we've kind of engaged with them on some interesting conversations around, making sure that are you tips training? So training your pourers to make sure that students aren't consuming too much, do that, checking IDs, that kind of thing, so that something that I had not thought about. But yes, that's a great group, or religious and spiritual life is a great group to be connected with. Right, Orlando, I will turn it back over to you.
Okay. Thank you for that wonderful presentation, by the way. And as I already announced, certificates will be a minimum of 10 business days. So look out for emails for that. I have no other announcements. So Jamie said thank you to you.
Thank you, Jamie. I appreciate your being here and your participation.
And thank you, Jamie. And thank you. I can't remember her name. She just left. Julie. Thank you, Julie, for showing up as well. And everyone have a good day.
Have a great day.